The rain didn't just fall tonight. It hunted me down, cold fingers clawing at my skin as I stood shivering under a flickering street lamp on Pine Street. 17 missed calls from my husband glowing like accusations on my phone screen. 5 years ago, Miles promised me forever under a cheap umbrella at a courthouse wedding, rain-soaked and laughing. Tonight was supposed to be our anniversary, a candlelit dinner at the Pink Door, but he didn't show. And I didn't call him back. I didn't need to. Lila's text had already sliced through the haze of my denial. He's at the Rusty Anchor with some blonde. Don't let him play you again, Evie. 3 miles of Seattle's wet streets stretched between me and that bar, and I ran every single one of them, sneakers slapping puddles, breath fogging in the October chill. Not because I was angry. Not yet. I ran because I needed to see it, needed to know if the man I'd built my life around was slipping through my fingers like the water dripping off my hood. By the time I got there, my jeans clung to my legs, heavy and useless, and my hair plastered my face like a drowned thing. The Rusty Anchor squatted at the edge of Capitol Hill, neon buzzing over a cracked door, the kind of place that smelled like stale beer and bad decisions. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Through the fogged-up window, I saw him. Miles. My Miles, leaning across a sticky table, his dark hair catching the dim light. That easy grin I used to chase across a room now aimed at her. Claire Donovan, his marketing assistant, all sharp cheekbones and sharper smiles, her hand brushing his like it belonged there. I stood there, a ghost in the rain, watching my husband flirt with another woman on the night he was supposed to be mine. Part of me wanted to storm in, flip the table, and scream until the walls shook. But I didn't. I just watched. My breath shallow, my chest tight, like I was waiting for someone to tell me this wasn't my life. I don't know how long I stood there, rain pooling in my shoes, before I turned away. The walk back to my car felt longer, heavier, like the city itself was pressing down on me. Seattle's always been good at that, wrapping you in gray and damp until you forget what sunlight feels like. I slid into the driver's seat, hands trembling as I gripped the wheel, and let my mind drift back to the first time I met Miles. University of Washington, sophomore year, a cramped dorm room smelling of instant ramen and ambition. He was Jasper's roommate, all lanky confidence and quick laughs, the kind of guy who could talk his way into anything. Jasper introduced us, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Evie, this is Miles. He's going to change the world, or at least crash trying." My little brother, 2 years younger and a million times brighter, saw something in Miles I didn't catch until later. They were inseparable back then, coding late into the night, dreaming up startups over cheap coffee. I fell for Miles somewhere between those nights. His charm sneaking past my defenses like a thief I didn't know I'd invited in. 2 years ago, Jasper died. A car crash on I-5, 10 miles from home. The cops said he'd been drinking, lost control, and slammed into a guardrail. I didn't believe it. Jasper didn't drink, not like that. He was a lightweight who'd nurse 1 beer for hours just to fit in. Miles was the last one with him that night. He came home late, clothes rumpled, eyes red, saying they'd had coffee at our place, and Jasper insisted on driving back to his apartment. "I tried to stop him, Evie," he'd said, voice cracking just enough to make me believe him. I needed to believe him. Jasper was gone, and Miles was all I had left to hold on to, the only piece of my brother I could still touch. But now, staring at the dashboard, rain drumming the roof like a heartbeat, I wondered if I'd been holding on to a lie. Back at our apartment in Queen Anne, the silence hit me harder than the rain ever could. The place was dark, a mess of half-finished design sketches and coffee mugs I hadn't bothered to wash. Miles wasn't home yet. I kicked off my soaked shoes, grabbed a towel, and sank onto the couch, the damp fabric creaking under me. My phone buzzed. Another text from Lila. "You okay? Need me to come over?" I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I poured a cold cup of coffee from the pot I'd brewed that morning, the bitter taste grounding me as I stared at the wall. That's when I saw it. Jasper's old stuff. A cardboard box shoved in the corner, untouched since we moved in. I don't know why I got up, why I started digging through it right then. Maybe I wanted a distraction from Miles and Claire, or maybe some part of me knew I'd find something. My fingers brushed a familiar shape, a brass table lamp Jasper snagged at the Ballard Sunday Market years ago. He'd loved it, called it retro chic, even though it was just a dented relic with a frayed cord. I turned it over, tracing the scratches, and felt something shift inside. A loose panel. I pried it open, and there it was, a tiny USB drive no bigger than my thumbnail taped to the base. My stomach flipped. Jasper was always hiding things, little Easter eggs from his coding days, but this felt different. I stumbled to my laptop, hands still wet, and plugged it in. The screen flickered, a single file popping up, for evdx.il. I clicked it, and there, in Jasper's messy digital scrawl, were the words that stopped my heart. Evie, if you're reading this, don't trust Miles. The rain outside picked up, slamming the windows like it wanted in. I sat there, staring at the screen, coffee forgotten, my breath loud in my ears. 5 words. 5 words that cracked open everything I thought I knew. Miles wasn't just cheating. Whatever he'd done, whatever he was hiding, it went deeper than Claire, deeper than me. And Jasper, my sweet, reckless little brother, had known something about it. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just listened to the storm, wondering how long I'd been living with a stranger. The rain hadn't let up by morning. A relentless gray curtain slapping against the windows as I sat hunched over my laptop, Jasper's words burning into my skull. Don't trust Miles. 5 syllables that turned my apartment into a stranger's house, every creak of the floorboards a whisper I couldn't ignore. I hadn't slept. How could I? Miles had stumbled in around 3 a.m., mumbling something about a late meeting before collapsing into bed, his cologne trailing a faint whiff of something floral that wasn't mine. I didn't wake him. I didn't ask. I just sat there in the dark, the USB's weight in my pocket heavier than the coffee mug I drained twice over, trying to make sense of a message from a ghost. By 6, the sky was still bruised dark, and I couldn't take the silence anymore. I grabbed my jacket, the laptop, and that damn USB slipping out before Miles could stir. The hideout was only a mile away, a dive bar tucked off Pike Street, where Lila slung drinks and traded barbs with the early morning drunks. She'd texted me again at dawn. You alive? Spill it. I needed her, not just because she was my oldest friend, but because she'd known Jasper too. Back when he'd crash on her couch with his wild ideas and worse coffee, if anyone could help me crack this, it was her. The bar smelled like spilled whiskey and regret when I pushed through the door, the jukebox humming some mournful Tom Waits tune. Lila looked up from wiping the counter, her green-streaked hair catching the dim light, and clocked me instantly. Jesus, Evie, you look like you've been hit by a truck. What's up? I dropped the laptop on the bar, my hands shaking as I pulled up Jasper's file. This. She leaned in, squinting at the screen, and I watched her face shift from curiosity to something harder as she read those 5 words. There's more, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Encrypted stuff. Jasper's code. You used to mess with that crap with him, right? Lila nodded, slow, like she was piecing it together. She dragged a stool over, cracked her knuckles, and got to work, her fingers flying over the keys while I paced behind her, the rain drumming a rhythm that matched my pulse. 10 minutes later, she froze. Evie, sit down. I didn't want to, but I did, and she turned the screen toward me. Jasper's digital journal cracked open like a confession. One entry, dated 2 days before he died, hit me like a punch. Miles is stealing data from the company. millions in client info. I told him to stop, and he threatened me, said I'd regret it. My throat closed up. I stared at the words, Jasper's voice echoing in my head, that goofy kid who'd once coded a prank app to rickroll my phone, now warning me from beyond the grave. He knew, I croaked. He knew Miles was dirty. Lila's hand landed on my shoulder, firm but not soft. Yeah, and he didn't tell you. The question is, what else didn't he say? I wanted to scream that Jasper would have told me, that he trusted me, but the truth gnawed at me. He hadn't, not about this. Lila kept scrolling, her frown deepening. There's more here, but it's locked tight. He mentions a backup in the company's server. Evie, if Miles did something to him. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I stood up, dizzy, the bar spinning. I need air. I didn't get air. I got in my car and drove straight to Miles's office, a sleek glass box in South Lake Union where his startup churned out promises of the next big thing. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but my clothes still clung damp as I marched through the lobby, flashing a tight smile at the receptionist who knew me from holiday parties. Miles around? She pointed me to the conference room, but he wasn't there. Claire was. She sat at the long table, papers spread out like a battlefield, her blonde hair pulled back in a way that screamed control. She looked up, those sharp eyes locking onto me, and smiled like we were old friends. Evie, hey, Miles is in a meeting. Want me to grab him? I didn't sit. I didn't smile back. What were you doing with him last night at the Rusty Anchor? Her smile didn't budge, but something flickered in her gaze, quick as a snake's tongue. Oh, that. Work stuff. Pitching to a client over drinks, you know how it is. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her voice smooth as polished glass. Are you jealous, Evie? Don't be. I'm not here to steal your man. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But Jasper's words clawed at me, and the way her fingers tightened on her pen told me she was lying. Work stuff, I echoed, stepping closer. On our anniversary, funny timing. She laughed, light and practiced. Coincidence. Relax, okay? I didn't relax. I turned to leave, but her voice followed me. He's lucky to have you, you know. I stopped, glancing back, and caught her on the phone as I hit the hallway, her tone low and urgent. She knows, Miles. Handle it. My stomach dropped. I didn't wait for the elevator, taking the stairs 2 at a time, my sneakers squeaking on the polished concrete. By the time I hit the parking lot, my head was a mess, Jasper's warning and Claire's smirk tangling into something I couldn't unsee. I needed to think, to breathe, so I drove to Gasworks Park, the one place Jasper loved more than anywhere else. The park sprawled along Lake Union, rusted pipes jutting up like bones against the slate sky. I parked near the old gas plant, grabbed my phone, and started running, the muddy path sucking at my shoes. Jasper used to drag me here, snapping photos of the sunset, saying it was the only place in Seattle that felt alive. Now it felt hollow, but I ran anyway, my breath puffing out in sharp bursts, the drizzle stinging my face. I replayed that night 2 years ago, Miles coming home late, his shirt streaked with dirt, his story about coffee and Jasper driving off. It never added up. Jasper didn't drink, not enough to crash. I pulled up the USB file on my phone, scrolling to the last line as I slowed near the water's edge. If I disappear, check the company server. It's all there. My legs gave out and I sank onto a bench, the cold metal biting through my jeans. Miles wasn't just cheating. Whatever he'd done, Jasper had seen it, and it cost him everything. I stared at the lake, waves lapping dark and restless, and felt the weight of it settle in my chest. I'd trusted Miles because I had to, because losing Jasper left me with nothing else. But now I had a choice. Keep running from the truth or chase it down no matter where it led. My phone buzzed, Lila again. Found more in the code. Call me. I didn't call. Not yet. I stood up, rain dripping off my hood, and made a promise to the brother I couldn't save. I'm going to find out, Jazz. Whatever it takes. The promise I made to Jasper hung in the air like the damp mist rolling off Lake Union, clinging to me as I trudged back to my car from Gasworks Park, my sneakers caked with mud and my mind racing faster than my heartbeat. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy stillness that pressed against my chest, but I couldn't shake the words from his journal. Check the company's server. Whatever Miles had done, whatever he'd hidden, it was there, buried in his startup's digital guts. And I wasn't waiting another second to find it. My phone buzzed again as I slid into the driver's seat, Lila's name flashing on the screen. I answered this time, my voice rough from the cold. What'd you find? She didn't waste breath on small talk. More entries. Jasper tracked Miles moving data to an offshore account. Dates, times, and even a client name. Orion Tech. He was scared, Evie. The last thing he wrote was about meeting Miles that night. That night. The night he died. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. I'm going home. I need to talk to him. The drive back to Queen Anne felt endless, Seattle's streets slick and gleaming under the streetlights, every red light a taunt. By the time I pulled into our building's lot, it was past 9, the sky a deep, bruised purple. The apartment was dark when I stepped inside, but I heard Miles in the kitchen, the clink of a glass hitting the counter. I flicked on the living room light, Jasper's busted lamp still lying in pieces from last night, and set my laptop on the coffee table, the journal file already open. Miles walked in, shirt untucked, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, and stopped when he saw me. "You're late," he said, like I was the one dodging questions. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. "What did you do to Jasper?" The words came out sharp, cutting through the quiet, and his face changed, that easy charm he wore like armor slipping just enough for me to see the crack beneath. He laughed, short and hollow, swirling the whiskey like it was a prop. "What's this about now? You still on that? Evie, you need sleep." I stepped closer, pointing at the screen. "Jasper knew you were stealing from the company. Orion Tech, offshore accounts. He wrote it all down, Miles. Said you threatened him." His eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to me, and for a second I thought he'd bolt. Instead, he set the glass down, slow and deliberate, and ran a hand through his hair. "Jasper was paranoid, okay? He didn't get it. That data was my way out, our way out. I was building something bigger than us." My stomach twisted. "So you admit it?" He sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Yeah, I moved some files, big deal. Jasper freaked out and wanted to play hero. I told him to back off." I leaned in, voice trembling. "And then what? You made sure he couldn't talk?" Miles's jaw tightened and he stepped toward me, close enough I could smell the liquor on his breath. "You think I'd hurt him? Your brother? I loved him too, Evie. Loved. Past tense. I shoved the laptop at him, forcing him to look. "Then why's he dead, Miles? You were with him that night. What happened?" He stared at the screen, then slammed the lid shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He wouldn't listen. He was going to ruin everything I'd worked for. His voice cracked, and he grabbed my shoulders, fingers digging in. "You don't get it. I didn't mean for it to go that far." I tore free, stumbling back, my heart pounding so loud I barely heard my own words. "Go that far? What did you do?" He didn't answer, just turned away, but I saw it in his eyes, guilt raw and ugly. I grabbed my phone and ran for the door, his shout chasing me. "Evie, wait." I didn't wait. I drove straight to Claire's place in Capitol Hill, my hands shaking on the wheel, Jasper's lamp rattling in the passenger seat where I'd thrown it. Her building was a squat brick thing, lights glowing through the blinds, and I banged on her door until my fist hurt. She opened it, barefoot in yoga pants, her face paling when she saw me. Evie, what the hell? I pushed past her, dropping the lamp on her coffee table with a thud. Tell me what happened that night. Miles, Jasper, all of it. She backed up, hands raised like I was a cop with a warrant. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone, opened the journal, and shoved it in her face. He's stealing millions, Claire. Jasper knew, and now he's dead. You were with Miles. Start talking, or I call the cops right now. Her cool girl mask cracked, and she sank onto the couch, rubbing her temples. Okay, Miles. He messed up. Jasper found out about the data and threatened to go to the board. That night, Miles got him drunk, spiked his coffee with something, said it'd just knock him out, keep him quiet for a bit. I didn't think he... She swallowed hard, eyes darting to the floor. He put him in the car, let him drive, said it looked like an accident. My legs gave out and I hit the carpet, the room spinning. He killed him. Claire nodded, barely a whisper. I didn't know he'd go that far, I swear. She fumbled with a drawer, pulled out a portable drive, and tossed it to me. That's from the server. Everything Jasper wanted you to find, take it. I'm done. I clutched the drive, my vision blurring, but I wasn't done. I stumbled to my car and dialed Lila to tell her, but before she picked up, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered, and a woman's voice cut through, calm and clipped. Evelyn Carver, this is Detective Nadia Brooks, SPD. We need to talk about your brother's case. I froze, rain starting to speckle the windshield again. How'd you get this number? She didn't flinch. I've been watching your husband's company. Meet me at the precinct. Now. 20 minutes later, I sat across from her in a sterile room, the drive and USB on the table between us. Nadia, mid-40s with a no-nonsense stare, slid a tablet in her lap. Traffic cam footage from I-5, night of the crash. The video played, rainy but blue. Jasper's beat-up Honda swerving, then Miles was kept turning, nudging the bumper just enough to send it spinning into the driveway. Not an accident. No. My breath stopped, tears running, but I forced them back. You knew? Nadia's jaw tightened. Suspected, no proof till now. What have you got? I pushed the drive forward, voice steady despite the wreckage inside me. Everything. His confession, the data, all of it. She nodded once, like a judge dropping a gavel. Good. We'll need more. Can you get him to talk? I looked at the screen, Jasper's car crumpled like paper, and felt something harden in me. Yeah, I can. Nadia's eyes met mine, a flicker of something like respect. Then let's end this. The precinct hummed around us, but all I heard was my own pulse, loud and furious, ready to bring Miles down. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat across from Detective Nadia Brooks, the grainy video of Jasper's crash still looping in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't pause. Miles's truck, nudging my brother's car into oblivion, wasn't just betrayal, it was a death sentence, and I'd slept next to the executioner for 2 years. Nadia slid the tablet back into its case, her voice cutting through the haze. We've got enough to arrest him, Evie, but a confession seals it. Are you up for this? My hands curled into fists, nails biting my palms, and I nodded, the weight of Jasper's USB and Claire's drive heavy in my jacket pocket. Let's do it. She didn't smile, just handed me a tiny recorder, its cold metal a promise of justice. Gasworks Park, neutral ground, we'll be close. I didn't ask how she knew that place mattered. She'd done her homework. The drive to Gasworks felt like a funeral procession. Seattle's skyline smudged against a sky threatening more rain. I parked near the old gas plant, its rusted towers clawing at the dusk, and texted Miles from a burner phone. Nadia gave me. Meet me at Gasworks. I'm ready to forgive you. My stomach churned as I hit send, but I didn't hesitate. He'd come. He always thought he could charm his way out of anything, and I was counting on that arrogance now. 15 minutes later, his truck rolled up, headlights slicing through the gloom. He stepped out, hair mussed, jacket slung over one shoulder like this was just another fight we'd patch up with apologies and lies. "Evie?" he called, voice soft. "You scared me running off like that." I stood by the water's edge, the recorder humming in my pocket, and forced my face into something like regret. I overreacted. I need to know the truth about Jasper. He walked closer, hands in his pockets, that familiar grin tugging at his lips. "I told you, babe, he was drunk and stubborn. I couldn't stop him." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and stepped toward him, close enough to see the flicker of unease in his eyes. "Claire said different. Said you spiked his drink, put him in that car." His grin faltered and he laughed, too loud for the quiet park. "Claire's full of it. She's jealous, trying to mess with us." I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording I'd made at her place, her voice crackling through the air. "Miles got him drunk and let him drive. Said it'd look like an accident." His face went slack, eyes darting like a trapped animal, and I pressed harder. "You killed him, Miles, my brother." "For what? Money?" He lunged for the phone, faster than I expected, his fingers brushing mine as I yanked it back. "You don't understand," he shouted, voice breaking. "Jasper was going to tank everything. The data, the deal, our future. I didn't mean to. It just happened." The words hit me like a slap, raw and unfiltered, and I stumbled back, rain starting to speckle my hood again. "It just happened?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You pushed his car off the road." He froze, chest heaving, then ran a hand over his face, desperation seeping through. "I panicked, okay? He wouldn't shut up about the cops, and I nudged him. I didn't think he'd die." I stared at him, the man I'd loved, and saw nothing but a coward. That's when the shadows moved. Nadia and 2 officers stepping out from behind the gas towers, badges glinting. "Miles Carver," she said, calm as steel. "You're under arrest." He spun, eyes wild, and made a break for his truck, but they were faster, tackling him into the mud before he got 10 feet. I watched them cuff him, his curses muffled by the dirt, and felt the recorder's weight lift as I handed it to Nadia. "Got it all," I said, voice flat. She nodded, a rare softness in her gaze. "You did good, Evie. We'll take it from here." They hauled Miles away, his truck's headlights fading into the night, and I stood there, rain soaking through my jacket, wondering why victory tasted so hollow. The next morning, I sat in a lawyer's office downtown, the city humming beyond the glass walls. Nadia called at dawn. Miles was charged with manslaughter and fraud, the server data tying him to a $5 million theft from Orion Tech. His startup was finished, assets frozen, investors fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. The lawyer slid divorce papers across the desk, Miles's signature already scrawled at the bottom, sent from lockup. "He'll didn't fight it," the guy said, adjusting his tie. I signed my name, Evelyn Carver, no longer tethered to his, and left without a word, the ink still wet on the page. Outside, the air smelled clean, rain-washed, but my chest ached like I'd run a marathon. I didn't go home. I went to a coffee shop on First Avenue, the kind Jasper would have loved with its mismatched chairs and overpriced lattes. Claire was waiting when I walked in, perched at a corner table, her usual polish dulled by dark circles under her eyes. She stood as I approached, hands twisting together. "Evie, I'm sorry. I didn't know he'd kill Jasper. I thought he'd just scare him." I set my bag down, staring at her until she flinched. "You knew enough to stay quiet," I said, cold and steady. "You helped him cover it up." She opened her mouth, then closed it, tears welling. "I'm testifying against him. I owe you that." I picked up my coffee, the steam curling between us. "You don't owe me anything. Keep your guilt. I've got enough of my own." I walked out, leaving her there, the bell above the door jangling like a goodbye. Back at the apartment, I stood in the living room, Jasper's broken lamp still scattered across the floor. The silence was deafening, no Miles, no lies, just me and the mess we'd left behind. I sank onto the couch, pulling the USB from my pocket, its edges worn from my grip. Nadia said the case was airtight now, Claire's testimony the final nail. Miles would rot in a cell and Jasper's name would be cleared, but it didn't fill the hole he'd left. I traced the lamp's dents with my finger, remembering his laugh, his dumb jokes, and felt the first tear slip free. Not for Miles. For the brother I couldn't save, and the life I'd have to rebuild without him. The apartment felt like a tomb when I woke up the next morning, October 25th, the silence thicker than the fog creeping past my window. Miles was gone, locked away in a cell somewhere, and Jasper's broken lamp still lay scattered across the floor, a monument to everything I'd lost. I didn't clean it up, not yet. I sat there on the couch, the USB in one hand, a cold mug of coffee in the other, staring at the pieces like they could tell me what came next. Seattle stretched out beyond the glass, gray and endless, but for the first time in days, the rain had stopped, leaving a fragile stillness that almost felt like hope. Almost. My chest still ached, a dull throb that hadn't eased with Miles's arrest or Claire's tears, but it was mine now, not theirs to twist. The doorbell jolted me out of my haze, a sharp buzz cutting through the quiet. I shuffled over, barefoot on the cold hardwood, and found Lila standing there, her green hair tucked under a beanie, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a crumpled ticket in the other. "Hey," she said, stepping inside without asking. "Figured you'd need this." She poured the coffee, strong and black, into my mug, then slapped the ticket on the counter. "My gig's tonight, first show in months. You're coming." I opened my mouth to argue, but she cut me off, her voice firm. "You don't have to fix everything alone, Evie. Not anymore." I looked at her, the friend who'd cracked Jasper's code, who'd stood by me when I couldn't stand myself, and felt something shift, a crack in the wall I'd built around my grief. I took the coffee, the warmth seeping into my palms, and glanced out the window again. A sliver of sunlight broke through the clouds, faint but stubborn, painting the room in soft gold. It hit me then, sitting there with Lila's quiet faith and Jasper's ghost hovering in the wreckage. Miles had taken so much, but he hadn't taken everything. I set the mug down, picked up a sketch pad from the table and started writing. Not designs this time, but words. I'm Evie Carver and this is my story. Not his, not theirs, mine. The pen scratched across the page, messy and real, and for the first time in years I felt the weight lift. Not all at once, but enough to breathe. Later, as I stood in the crowd at Lila's show, the bass thumping through my bones, I thought about the lesson buried in all this mess. The truth doesn't always save you. Sometimes it just breaks you open, leaves you raw and bleeding until you figure out how to stitch yourself back together. I'd loved Miles too hard, trusted him too long, and it cost me Jasper, cost me years I couldn't get back. But standing there, watching Lila pour her soul into the mic, I realized forgiving myself was harder than forgiving him, and maybe that's where the real fight was. He'd tried to bury me in his lies, but I'd clawed my way out, not for revenge, but for me. The best payback wasn't justice, though I'd gotten that too. It was living, messy and true, in a world I'd make my own. Jasper would have liked that. I think I did too.